All right, this morning I came in and I failed to come back yesterday. We were taking down a metal building that, you park an RV under, and we were moving over to my son. So they were out there doing that when I was doing this, and I had planned on coming back and pulling this off. You don't want to let this dry, as you're going to see. It's going to be a meticulous extraction of this. This won't just peel off in one piece as it would have if it would have dried for an hour or two, even 3, 4. When you pull off the tinfoil, it pulls where it's wedged in there, it'll pull it off. It actually adds effect. We're not going to get that now because I let it dry and it's going to be hard. But the rock is real dry. This one's dry from the splatter texture, and this is the imprint, we call it. And I'm just going to go through now and try and pull this off, which is going to be fun. Down here, I didn't really crumple it up much as I did here. This piece is going to be the hardest. This one is coming off, except for a little bit here and there. Now I also have a little pick here that I use that'll dig that out if it's going to be stuck in anywhere. So I anticipate this one will. That's not so bad. Up here on top though, I embedded it a lot more, and yeah, it's just coming off in littler pieces. Oh, there's a nice big piece that came off. I remember back in my younger days, we were using tinfoil texture exclusively, because I didn't have rubber skins at the time. And we did this job, it was a large job, and we mudded each rock, and then we coated it with the tinfoil, and we thought, well, let's just leave it overnight. And we came back and we spent all day trying to get the tinfoil off. So you don't want to leave it on. Now notice where this color, where the rock is dried naturally, and then this color where it was covered with tinfoil, that's an XYZ difference, and it's greener underneath, and that's just the way it works. It was covered, so it didn't hydrate to the extent that the other one did. That's got some good texture. I mean, right in here, over in there, where the tinfoil's like a knife and it embeds in there. When you have that normally and you let it dry an hour or two and you pull that out, it really makes good relief. This is pretty gnarly right here. The rest of this, yesterday before I left, I took a paintbrush and I just kind of blended it in a little bit. And there are areas like this where you've kind of got a hole. It's not so much that it's a hole, but it didn't get the mud to consolidate, and that can look like a texture, but I also want to coat that with what we call a hydroseal. So the top, all this still needs to be what I call knocked down. We're still going to play it. Now these two, we're going to take those off next, and they won't be a problem getting out. That's almost a cast right there. I mean, it is, because it dried. Instead of leaving it on for, putting it in the mud and leaving it on to where the mud gets hardened, but yet not cured, that's when I usually pull it off. So it's more of a stamp casting as opposed to a casting like this is. But even that said, that's pretty good imagery right there. And it peels right off. Now these lines here, I'm going to soften that. It looks like a start and stop point, but I'm going to soften that. I'm going to soften this whole thing. When we get done, we'll get the look on it one more time. In areas that you have too much, you can just take this and just tip it, knock it. So I'm looking for anything that's really a protrusion, sticking out in an odd manner. The other thing I'll do is I'll take, this is just a little sanding disc. It's like only a quarter of the disc. It's got like sandpaper, but it's on a plastic, not paper. And a lot of times I'll take this, especially on this rock over here with the granite. We would have a pool that we would splatter with this, and it's got a beautiful texture, but what happens is with the sand, there's little pieces of sand that stick out like glass. And I once had a lady that called me up on the phone after we had been done on her job, and she said, "You owe me $80. And I said, "Why is that?" "Well, you got a snag in my $80 bathing suit." And it was like, because it was so rough. So what we ended up doing with those rocks right there is we would texture them and then take a half of a disc and just lightly sand it. Just, I mean, ever so little. if you take and do what we call a Stevie Wonder, Stevie Wonder's blind, he'd be on this rock going, hey, that's a nice rock, Jim, but it's sharp. So you just take this literally in your hand and just literally a little sand like that, and you just knock down those individual pieces of sand that were glass, and now with a blower, that's now still rough, but it's not sharp. That's all it takes. The other thing you could do is obviously take this grinding wheel. This is a metal cutting grinding, and you can knock it down with that. But you know, the day after, it's still pretty soft, so you don't want to polish this rock. That's not the idea, but you can knock it down just like I can right here. I'm going to do the same thing and knock down some of the roughness and then blow it off. Because if there's little peninsulas that stick up, like little peninsulas do, stick out from the work, they can get knocked off. And if you stain this, where that gets knocked off now is gray. So it can look, you know, bad. So knocking these down just a little bit is a good thing. This corner that was real sharp does not look that way now. It's got a nice rock-like imagery to it. And I'm just going to play it down and soften it just a little bit more. If you did this same process 3 days later, it wouldn't knock down so easy because it'd be getting harder. So it's best to do it literally the day after. Just come by and just touch it up a little with this. Really simple and fast. Okay, I had a line just now where the tinfoil stopped and this was thrown and just brushed in. And I just knocked down that line to where it's not so obvious. There's a better one over here that I need to address. And I've got my three basic tools right here. That's the line that I'm not real fond of. It's a little too pronounced. So just taking this a little bit, and you can knock that down and chip it where it's tapered into that. And now that break looks much more natural. In fact, a lot of times, like this was the edge that I more trialed. It's not real sharp, but just running this like this across here can knock that down a little and roughen it to where it looks more weathered, you know, as a stone would, a rock would. So literally, I just go by with whatever's in my hand and just knock down the roughness. Just going by, just literally. Now this area right here looks pretty ugly. See that? See, that's kind of a, I mean, you could get rock that would look like that. It happens. But if we make it, sometimes it looks fake. So just by knocking that down just a little, it won't be so obvious that I've been there. Now here, I'm seeing a little white mesh. I don't know if you can see that. I'm going to need to coat over that. Not that it's going to hurt anything, but I'm going to wash this rock down after I'm done chipping on it and sanding it a little bit. And then I'll touch it up with what we call a hydroseal to waterproof it and to make it more unified in its surface. All the material will be the same in its look. The other thing I didn't do yesterday was go by and trial this meets the actual table. So I've got some slag sticking out. And again, just by running this now, I can clean that up. And it won't be a straight edge. You don't want a natural straight edge as trouble. This one here really came out a lot. So I'll just knock it off. And that chipping makes for a very natural edge, as opposed to a trial look. This edge is actually coming down to where it's like this. And this little point in here where it triangles down to 0 is going to break off. So I'm going to snipe that to where it's more like this. That's kind of, especially when we go to move this thing, guarantee if you've got a little triangle wedge like that, it's going to break off. And yesterday I could have trialed it, but it would have looked straight. It would look trialed. This way here, it looks much more natural. But, you know, more times than not, this thing is going to be, and here's another, here's where I stopped the throw mud, here's where I stopped the tinfoil. There's a pretty odd looking line there. So just by scratching that up a little, chiseling it a little bit, you'll relieve that, and it won't be there. This is a texture method, it's carving. And this isn't a knife or an awl or something, but it's still taking material off. That's the true definition of carving. If material's falling off when you're processing it, that's carving. When did you carve? A lot of guys will carve when it's wet. Well, that usually leaves more of a tooling mark. A chiseling, a breaking as a carving method produces much more realism than when it's wet. So carving can be done right after you throw in the mud, leave it sit for an hour or two, leave it sit for 12 hours, leave it sit for 24, 36. We were coming back a couple of days later on some of our projects, and it was still being with a little hammer. Let me see if I can grab it. I don't need this force right now where I hook this up to my airline. This thing, you take it and you just run it. You can make a nice fractured crack in here. We were doing a lot of that back in the day with the couple of days after we had mudded the coat as a texture technique. That's still carving. What do you use to carve? When do you do it? What are you carving into? What's the type of mud? All these variable changes come out with a different XYZ. All right, gonna make this one now to where we knock it down. I'm always gonna start on the very bottom and just literally rub down any roughness, knocking down the sand on the external part of the rock. You know, it reminds me, this rock right over here has granite texture. This was splattered on and knocked down. It's got, you can actually see some of the images, maybe if I got that down, you can actually see some of the images of sand grain in this. But this is really knocked down quite a bit, much more than I'm doing right now, but I also used a finer sand. And it was more diluted. There was more liquidness to the mud. The more liquidy the mud, the finer the texture, because this is made to look like granite. Okay, just as one last measure, we want to take and Stevie Wonder the rock one more time just to make sure we don't have any rough, because we had a bunch of sand on the surface and that can impede your true feel and touch. And you'll feel the areas that you haven't sanded, they will be sharp as knives. The other thing is the aesthetics of the boulder, you know, you can see with your eye if something's odd and you don't like it and you have to tend to do something with it. But that's gutter done. I want it to be, you know, dust free. I don't want anything to impede the bond of my next layer, which is going to be a hydroseal mud. All right, so just got both of the rocks in from washing them. They're sopping wet. Our next step is to take our bonding agents, diluted 2 waters to 1 of the glue, and apply this as a bonding agent. We're also going to mix into the hydroseal, which is a mud, but it's going to be the viscosity of paint. We're going to mix the glue into that. We're going to make sure we got a hard shell outside that has no sand in it, and it's really a synthetic. It's a plastic. Even though it's cementatious, it'll still receive stain, but it's my last coat to put on here. I like the texture, and this is now the time to go into hydroseal. So I'm gonna let these dry a little bit, mix me up some hydroseal, and then I'll put the bonder on and we'll start dealing with them. Okay, these rocks are not bone dry. They'd probably be better to be. It's better to have them dry because when you put this bonding agent on a dry surface, it sucks into the surface, and if its porosity is filled with water, it won't suck that, so it doesn't bond as well, frankly. So I'm just going to put this bonding coat on. Real apparent to us. Now the viscosity of this mud is like a paint. And what we're going to do is paintbrush this on and seal the surface against water intrusion. Also, we're giving it an outside garment that's synthetic. It's actually a plastic if you look at the acrylic, and it's no longer cement, and it's got no sand in it, so it's not going to ever produce efflorescence. I've been training people since 1996. It's 2020 right now. And over the years, everyone says the same thing. Isn't this going to fill in a lot of the definition? No, it's not. It's very thin, and we're not going to leave it piled up anywhere that it would fill up the area with a material. And the worst thing we've got to look at here, depending on how warm it is, this stuff being so glue mixed, it's going to dry really quick. On a day like today, it's not because it's cold. It's probably about 50 degrees right now. The only worry I have is I don't want to leave paintbrush marks. If you have this too thick and or you put it on too thick, you're going to see paintbrush marks. And what I always do after I do a certain amount of area is I let it sit. In the summertime, you got to be a lot quicker. You'll probably paint this area and then do what I'm about to do. If I see paintbrush marks, I just daub this. And that, believe it or not, makes a minor texture on the surface. And that's done. Now, I don't see any holes that are bothering me on this, so I'm going to pursue the rest of the rock. And if you look right here, all right, so we got the 2 coats of hydroseal all completed. You know I said we're going to put another one on. I will. And as far as that, I'm done. I'm going to put these rocks out there on the side of the bank where the rock wall is. And this spring when I texture and repair those other ones, I'll stain it all together. I'll seal it all together. It'll be a done deal. But I wanted to show you the cardboard rock technology. And this is now done, a granite and more of a fractured rock. And there's a whole myriad of images that you can make with a lot of different techniques that I offer. So if you liked my video, please subscribe to my channel, share my videos, and like my videos. And if you need something, give me a call. I'm here. I just hope that you continue to watch my videos, and thanks for watching. Bye.
Yeah, we can see that the rock didn't want to play ball. It rolled over. Gonna get a little dirt on it. I don't really care. I'll pressure wash it. When I do the rest of this rock down there, I've got just built those in the last season, and this season's coming up, but I don't have time right now. I'm gonna pressure wash all that, texture it, and stain it, and I'll do this one or these here at that time. She's a beauty. Yeah, another rollover. All right, a rock out by the blackberries. That's the other cardboard one. And it was different shaped. It's more of a fractured rock than my rocks over there, so I just put it over here by itself. We'll stain it later.